What am I even doing here out in the middle of a mosquito-infested forest? And there's, of course, Tripoli and West Nile running around. Well, I'm here to check out an example of what people are calling a Native American marker tree. These native people use trees that they bent deliberately to mark trails throughout the interior of the continent. And were trail marker trees a part of the culture of the native people? I've been studying native people my entire life. And I don't want to say it, but I got a couple of degrees in the process. And I've given lectures all around New England. And I spent years working with primary sources, and never have I encountered any story, whether we're talking about the Midwest or any of the Eastern Woodlands, where we hear a description of a Native American marker tree. Robert Rogers never wrote about it, nor did Benjamin Church, nor did any of the captives who the native people brought and adopted into their villages across hundreds of years. The sad truth of the matter is that this gentleman in upstate New York came up with a kind of a fairy tale. It seemed cool to him, and I like it. It's fun. But no, the native people, as you know, burned our forests. Every 5 to 7 years, they'd light the forest on fire in the spring or the fall to burn off the undergrowth, to burn off the bracken, to burn off the chestnut husks, and make hunting easier, and also to aid them in clearing their fields for agriculture. There's no need for native people to use wood, impermanent structures like a tree, as a marker when they have glacial erratic rocks, cliff faces, and most of their movement was done along rivers and river valleys. When you walk along the edge of a river like I'm doing right now, you're walking on a path. And it's a path that's probably been here a long, long time. In some places, the paths have been turned into roads. In fact, most places they've been turned into roads. That's where our modern interstates travel, along old native paths. But they tend to follow rivers, of course. Think about how it is when you drive to work. When you're driving to work, you're taking the shortest distance between 2 points. You're trying to get in there. Once in a while, you might take the scenic route home. Do you? I do. On my way home, usually on a Thursday or Friday. Work is what the native people were doing when they were out on the road along these rivers, moving from point A to point B. They weren't dawdling. It wasn't about enjoying. They could at any moment be ambushed by an enemy tribe, or one of the members of their group could fall victim to some sort of sickness. Now, in their world, they would have said that they'd be falling victim to an attack by evil spirits sent against them by an enemy tribe. To us, we're out in the woods. We're having a ball. When you're thinking about something involving native people, think about it pragmatically. They're living their lives like you're living your life. Consider their movement through the woods as going to work or coming home from work. It's about safety. It's about doing it quickly. It's about doing it with as little drama as possible. That's what we're saying. And looking at this river, we see a steep bank on one side and a shallow bank on the other. Where are they walking? Up there or down here? I suppose it would depend on what they're doing. If they're going to war expecting potentially to be attacked or ambushed, they might be up there, in which case they're sneaking along. If they're moving the village from point A to point B, or returning or going on the winter hunt in a party of 20 or 30, they're over here on this side. Remember, war in the world of the native people is seasonal. There's a dude that wrote a book. Let's go back to a guy who wrote a book. And he wrote a book that needed to be written. And he wrote a book called The White Man's Indian. He used the word Indian. Of course, he wrote the book in like 1980. So don't hate the guy for using the word Indian. The white man's Native American. Are you happy now? And in that book, he talks about how we, the Europeans originally and later the Americans, in the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time, attribute to the native people the virtues that we need to attribute to them. When it was manifest destiny time and we had to move them out, I mean, they might be noble savages, but they were savages and they had to go. And then later on, when they were comfortably far away, I mean, we looked at them as harmless little Boy Scouts in the woods that had been totally aggrieved and oppressed and robbed by the colonists and the state and national government. They were looked at as students of nature. We're going to see the beginnings of American environmentalism in the Hudson River School portrayals by George Catlin of native people, Albert Beardstad of native villages. We're going to see the very first modern environmental commercial, being that famous commercial showing the native chief stumbling through polluted and soiled America with a tear in his eye, if you remember the commercial. So when we're talking about the native people, they reflect what we want them to reflect. Finally, we end up seeing the recent portrayal of native people. Maybe it's a product of the internet. Maybe it's a product of our love of fantasy. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, who knows? But we now see native people portrayed almost as if they were elves, magical elves. They move gigantic boulders to set up, almost like the Druids built the Stonehenge. They set these glacial, erratic rocks up on smaller rocks, and they practice some sort of nature ritual on them. And they bent trees like the one behind me to lead them toward something. They're not elves. They're people. They didn't have a lot of time to bend trees. If they did, the odds of finding a tree that they'd bent still standing, you might as well play your number. But this diagram I'm showing you here, this is a diagram created by some of the people that, espouse the mythology of the trail tree. And you can see that in creating a trail tree, the way they're proposing would mean that you'd be damaging the tree. The bark would be curtailed. It would make it more likely to be infested with insects, more susceptible to fires, attacked by woodpeckers and our friends the porcupine. All kinds of things would be more likely to hurt the tree when it was bent in such a fashion. This tree is a product of an accident that occurred in the forest. It has nothing to do with the hand of man. This tree is actually a crime scene, and to get to the bottom of it, we could go to Forest Forensics, which is a great little guidebook by Tom Wessels. And you can find Tom. I'm going to link him below. Tom Wessels knows more than I ever will about trees and the ecology of the forest. But that book is available on Amazon for like $10. And if you like getting out in the woods and hiking around, get yourself a copy. Because everything you find in the woods, as Wessels says, is basically like a crime scene. You can get to the bottom of what you're looking at through some simple clues. The most likely story that this tree has to tell is that it was hit by a blowdown. It fell on top of another tree. The tree that landed on it slowly bent it as the years went on. And of course, the tree that it was on rotted and ultimately is now gone. And the tree, hey, we could probably find remnants of it right here. I see a big beech branch. And what we have is a diagram almost of a catastrophe, because the tree's not old enough for this to have been done by native people. And we can see a clue as to why this is like it is, and that is right there. There's another bend. Notice? It's a big old cherry tree. Look at that. And that cherry's got a bend going out. Why is that? Why are those bends so prevalent? Well, here below me was a pasture. And that pasture, with its ambient light, caused the trees that were growing on the edge of it to throw out their branches toward the pasture. If you're stumbling and bumbling through your own special forest and you find a bent tree like the one behind me, remember the forest clearances that have gone on over the last 350, 400 years. Remember the merino sheep, the boxboard, the lumber, and the timber, and the charcoal cuts. Remember all that stuff. And then take a look at the tree in question and try to date it. Again, 75, 80 years old right here, black birch. You do that dating, you come up with a really old tree. It's 400 plus year old, and there's not too many of those left, as we know. You're talking about a virgin tree anyway, a tree that can date back to pre-contact times. Just finding a tree like that makes a guy like me do backflips. When you're thinking about trees in forests, the thing you got to remember is there's lots of things that happen to forests. Right behind me, a microburst or maybe an F-0 tornado touched down about 8 years ago, creating this big fall in the middle of the forest that goes for about 300 yards. It's opened up a lot of sunlight. The canopy's really wide open, as you can see. Now think about what the effect of an open canopy like this is going to have on the trees that are growing around this opening, allowing the sunlight to come through. It's going to mean that the branches on the canopy, open canopy side of the tree are going to grow into the light, creating Native American trail marker looking trees. Trees that have extensive branches pointing toward this open canopy. Now in another 35, 40 years, there's going to be a regrowth. And you're going to see these things and go, oh, look at that. Another interesting thing is, take a look at all the deadfalls. How many living trees are penned under these deadfalls? They're still alive, and what's happened to them is they've been bent. And they're going to grow up, away from gravity, away from Isaac Newton, creating Native American trail marker looking thing. Look at what I'm seeing. A hemlock that has been forced out and to the right by a birch. And what do we know about hemlock and birches? Birches have a much shorter lifespan than hemlocks. So we can expect this hemlock to continue to grow. And this birch maybe has another few years left, maybe 20, maybe 30. But at some point, we're going to see this tree much larger than it is now. And it's going to have this odd bend in it. Where did it come from? It must be, no.